What's up, everyone? True Techno Gamer back at it, and we're going to talk about some gaming stuff. Lots going on lately. I'm sure if you follow gaming, you've heard all over. Leaks for new next generation consoles are kind of out there. A lot going on with PlayStation and with Xbox Team Green, and we're going to start there. We're going to start talking about Xbox. Please, you know the drill, like, subscribe, hit me up in the comments. This is an interesting one, guys, so look forward to chatting with you guys about this. Now, if you are a diehard Xbox fan, if you are one of those people who remember playing those long night sessions with local LAN parties on the first Halo game on the OG Xbox, if you're someone who remembers the monumental and amazing Xbox 360 launch, that system, one of the best systems of all time, and everything that it brought to the table with HD graphics and gamer score and Xbox Live and avatars and achievements and things that obviously are staples of gaming today, started there from Xbox 360 with Microsoft. Halo 3 being what it was, Gears of War tearing the roof off, the arrival of Forza Motorsport and Fable franchises and stuff like that, man. If you remember all of that stuff and you've loved Xbox for all of this time, you have to be in mourning right now. I'm sorry to say. It has been a really, really tough generation for Xbox and tough generation for Xbox fans. A lot of things have changed, to say the least, and there's been a lot happening that, frankly, is not very consumer friendly. A lot of anti-consumer type stuff happening, which is typically not how Xbox has been. Okay, so just to name some things top of my head, let's count the ways. Okay, we have seen price increases across the board. We've seen most recently price increases to Game Pass, the monthly subscription service that gives you access to a bunch of games. Man, I remember when they first came out with Game Pass, when it first launched in the Xbox One generation. At one point, they were just giving this thing away. They were just, wasn't it like $1 or something at one point? Right? Like, it was crazy. $1 gives you Game Pass for PC and for console, for Xbox consoles. You got access to all of these games day one, unlimited. You can play as much as you want. It was crazy. And then, they kind of came back to reality and it slowly crept up. But unfortunately, in the last 18 months or so, a year and a half to 2 years, they have increased prices on Game Pass a couple of times, several times. And now, for the top tier Game Pass, it is $30 a month. $360 a year. To put that in perspective, the top tier PlayStation Plus premium package is less than half of that. So, 18 months ago, Game Pass was like $15. That top tier was like $15, okay? A few years ago, it was $9.99, right, or something, right? So they have been creeping that thing up. Now it's to the point there's been news and stories that the Game Pass management subscription website crashed because when they announced this is like just a week ago, the servers crashed. Apparently, the website crashed from so many people going on there trying to cancel their Game Pass subscription. That's not a good look at all, right? We've seen the price of consoles. Guys, the price of consoles jump up, right? 5 years later, we are literally, 3 weeks removed just about from the 5-year anniversary of the launch of the Xbox Series consoles. The Series S and the Series X in 2020, okay? Here we stand in 2025, 5 years after launch, and both of those consoles are much more expensive today than they were 5 years ago. That is insane, guys. Now, yes, there is macroeconomics at play. Everybody has increased prices. We know PC component prices are just going through the roof. GPU prices are sky high and all of that stuff. We have seen prices increases on Sony's side. We've seen it on Nintendo side as well. But not as much as Xbox so far, right? And not as many times. Again, in the last year and a half to 2 years or so, they have increased the prices on the Xbox consoles multiple times. And now just recently, last month, this last round of increases, it just really puts it over the edge, guys. The Xbox Series X, the 1 terabyte, the kind of standard version with the disk drive, okay, launched in 2020 for $499, $500 US, okay? Today, that same console MSRP is $649. It is $150 more expensive than it was 5 years ago. That is crazy, my friends. And you thought that was bad. Do you realize that Microsoft is selling an Xbox Series X SKU, same console, same hardware, but with 2 terabytes this time, okay? They are selling that thing for $799. $800 for a 2 terabyte Xbox Series X. Mind you, that's $100 more than the PS5 Pro launched a year ago, when everyone was talking about how expensive that console was and how crazy that was. $700 for it, you know. But at least the PS5 Pro, which also comes with a 2 terabyte hard drive, by the way, is completely upgraded hardware, right? It's a different GPU, a bigger GPU, and has AI processing built in now. It has additional ray tracing hardware, you know, in there. It has faster memory. It has more memory, right, et cetera, et cetera. It is a, you know, a beefier piece of hardware, right? The Xbox Series X, this is the same hardware that launched 5 years ago in 2020. It just has a 2 terabyte hard drive, and I think a different aesthetic or material or something. Bro, come on now. $800 for a Series X, $300 more than it launched with, guys. This is the world we're living in. This is what Microsoft is doing, but this is the world we're living in, right? So we've seen that. Of course, we've seen a ton, unfortunately, multiple rounds in the past 2 years of layoffs, game cancellations, and studio closures across Xbox game studios. It's really a lot. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of employees were laid off. Game cancellations like the Perfect Dark game that has been in development. We've seen it. They announced it back in 2019 or 2020 or something like that. They finally pulled the plug on that. You know, it's sad. There's a lot of other games out there, but I mean, yo, it's been really, really bad. Not a great time to work for Xbox for sure. Okay, so we've seen that going on. Gosh, I mean, we're hearing reports that some retailers are no longer selling Xbox. Costco apparently is kind of clearing out their inventory and not planning to restock. And that's been confirmed by Costco. They're saying that it just is not selling much, it's not moving much, and you know, it's not a priority for them. That's crazy. We've heard rumors from like Walmart and other places. I don't think those have been confirmed yet, but you know, just the energy and the noise out there right now for Xbox, you gotta be in mourning, man, if you're an Xbox fan. And of course, you know, if you are someone that really, really loved Xbox and just kind of, you know, love that the competitive spirit that Xbox had, trying to take it at PlayStation, take it at Nintendo, and you know, yeah, that little fun that comes with the console wars, or came with the console wars. Well, that's all done and dead, right? Largely due to Microsoft now. If you haven't heard, Microsoft essentially conceded to the console war as we knew it, and you know, they're putting all of their games on as many devices as possible, including their biggest competitor in PlayStation. So yes, Microsoft Game Studio games are coming day one in some cases, if not day one, at least soon after, on PS5. We're talking games like Indiana Jones, Doom Dark Ages, Forza Horizon, Gears of War Reloaded, right? Sea of Thieves, right? I mean, there's others, but they're all coming on PlayStation 5. And of course, moving forward, a lot of them might be there day one on PlayStation 5. So the idea of, you know, yeah, these Xbox games are working so well on my Xbox console, that kind of is dead and gone, guys. It's dead and gone. You know, some people love that, but, you know, again, I know if you're like a diehard fan that's been there in the trenches with this company trying to, you know, push them, it's got to be a tough time. It's got to be some mourning going on. So there's probably more I'm forgetting, man. It has not been a good generation. It's not been a good few years. Yes, of course, to top all of that off, if you didn't know, Xbox Series consoles are getting spanked once again by PlayStation. Latest reports suggest that PlayStation 5 is outselling Xbox, both of them, Series S and X combined, by roughly 2.5 to 3x already. Not even close, guys. Not even close. Even reports suggesting that the sales of the Series S and X are even lower or slower than the Xbox One. That is saying something, right? It's just pretty bad. And yeah, you're not selling consoles, so let's increase the price dramatically so and make it so that it's $150 more than it was at launch 5 years ago, right? Now we're going to sell a bunch of them, right? Of course not, right? So it seems like Microsoft is all but just kind of saying like, look, we don't care about consoles especially anymore, right? And they're kind of leaning much more heavily into PC, which leads me to the key story here, right? Now, what does all of that actually say about Microsoft right now, right? Is it really that they're just throwing up the flag? Is there really just a sense of apathy? They just don't care anymore? It really isn't that. It's really simple, guys. Everything I just said points to the fact that Microsoft is absolutely done. Absolutely done. They're like, no more. We are not losing money on the Xbox business anymore. They're being greedy. And it's probably somewhat necessary, from their part. I say somewhat because you're talking about a company that's the second largest company in the entire universe, right? That is valued at over $3 trillion or something crazy, right? So, it's like, do they really not have the funds to handle this? Guys, video games and the console business especially is a losing proposition. It's a tough business when it comes to making money, which is what business is all about, right? Historically, it's a money losing business, right? You lose money on every console sold because you have to be super aggressive with the pricing because you want consoles to be a mass market consumer device, meaning that it can penetrate and reach the masses of people. It has to be at a price point that is affordable. That's the key point of a console that's different than, a high-end gaming PC and, some other types of consumer electronic stuff. Game consoles historically had to be affordable, right? And in many cases, the demand for more performance and, something more novel and, state-of-the-art is always there. And how do you do that by still keeping it affordable? Something that somebody can walk into a Walmart and, just spend $100, right? And come out with a console or something, right? That's a tough proposition. So, the nature of the business is we sell each console at a loss. We get as many consoles out there. We get as many people playing games on our devices out there so that they're buying more and more software. We make money on the software. Nowadays, we make money on the peripherals. We make money on the services. So we make money on those PS Plus and Game Pass subscriptions. We make money on those extra controllers and special edition this and that and the cameras and the microphones and the keyboard and mouse and whatever it is, right? Like that's where they're making money. But you need more people. You need more of an install base to have more people buying that stuff, right? Now the problem for Microsoft realized this, and they're not the only one. Sony did too. Nintendo does too. But the problem that they realize is that console business is not growing. In fact, it hasn't grown since its peak. The peak of it was the PS2 generation, right? The PS2 and the first Xbox and GameCube generation. The PS2 ran away with that, outselling, the competitors 6-7 to 1, not even close. But to this day, the PS2 is still the largest selling console of all time. It topped out at about 155 million units. Collectively, that generation, between all, including Dreamcast, GameCube, and Xbox, it wasn't that much. But collectively, they were looking at something around 230-ish million, right? Total consoles sold, okay? So the problem is since that generation, it's all been downhill. No generation has come close, right? And no single console has come close to the PS2 in that regard, right? Now the Switch is actually really close. It's kind of nipping on its heels. We'll see if it actually passes it. But in general, like every PlayStation has been lower. Obviously, Xbox has not come close to that. It's not a growing business. Though Microsoft is a big company, and they're in this to eventually make money. They were bleeding money in the first Xbox. It was really expensive hardware that they put into that thing. They reduced the price on the first Xbox, I'm pretty sure, before it even launched, right? Because they were trying to really compete with Sony and the PS2. Right, and they saw writing on the wall. I think it was either right before it launched or like right after launch. They dropped the price almost immediately, and they dropped the price on that thing several times in the span of 3 years. Okay, they were trying, it didn't work. Xbox 360, they went hard again Really, really nice hardware. Sold it for a loss. And then, of course, you had the red ring of death. That was a manufacturing defect in the hardware that cost Microsoft over $1 billion. Their own admission. So even if they were doing well then, which they seem to be up to that point, gosh, that put a huge dent into their bottom line. Okay, so they have just been the Xbox business has literally cost Microsoft billions of dollars lost, right, or over the course of the last 25 years or so, right? So they're not doing it anymore. They're not taking it anymore. We're not losing any more money on this business. That is clearly what the higher ups in Microsoft is saying. This Xbox thing, if you guys are going to keep it up, we got to start seeing some profit. I think that coming into the Series X and X, it was a real risk. It was a real sense of like, we're going to give it a go. Phil Spencer really believed in the Game Pass model. The whole purpose of Game Pass was to really break beyond the ceiling that seems to be over the hardware sales in the console space, right? Like, again, you're good if you're selling over 100 million units in a console. That's not small when you think about it, right? But it's not nearly enough to recoup the losses that these companies have to incur, right? Not to mention the fact that, I know this, but the number of gamers in the world is generally looked at to be about 1 billion people. About 1 billion people game on something. On a console, a PC, laptop, and then their mobile device, a smartphone, an iPad, or something, right? There's about 1 billion people gaming out there. So when you look at it like that and you say, okay, the console collectively, each console generation, the largest selling console generation might have been around 250 million. You're only a quarter of that. There's still so many people out there gaming on their mobile device or gaming on PC or whatever, right? Like, they're not tapping into that. And again, that business is not growing. So if you're only selling, Xbox 360 was Microsoft's biggest selling console. It sold about 86 million, something like that, not quite 90. So they never even hit 100, okay? Every PlayStation console except PS3 eclipsed 100 million. So PS5 as well, sorry. But it's still kind of going. And it looks like it's heading that way where it's going to pass 100, right? But pretty much Sony's on a track where 100 million is kind of like their threshold. They generally have been hitting that. But again, they're not growing much beyond that either, right? But Microsoft is not having it no more. And the latest evidence of that, guys, and let's get to it real quick, is in the launch of this ROG Ally X. This is a joint product, a partnership between Xbox and Asus to build a gaming handheld PC, effectively, that can basically blur the lines and deliver an Xbox console-like experience in your hand. That's the idea here. That's the vision here, right? So, I'm not going to go all into like just the spec, the hardware. I want to talk about a specific aspect of this. I'll show some of this, details here, right? But it actually looks pretty good, right? It's a, reasonably powerful handheld. It has 24, gigs of RAM, and, it has a 16 CU GPU from AMD, right? RDNA 3.5. So, relatively newer, a nice screen. They made some ergonomic customizations to make it feel more like an Xbox controller. And of course, the software is this is the first initial launch of this new Xbox UI, this new Xbox experience. That you boot right into it, and it looks like your Xbox dashboard that you see on your Xbox console. But this is a PC. This is really a Windows 11 PC underneath it, right? And it is unifying all of your PC gaming libraries and services into one UI, one place. So Epic Game Store, Steam, Game Pass, Uplay, Battle.net, you name it. Anything you can get on a Windows PC, you have all of that stuff. You boot into it in this particular machine, and you get this Xbox-like UI that has your library across all of that. You have your Game Pass library, has your Steam library, has your Epic, Game Store library, etc., etc. Hey, the vision for that seems pretty interesting, right? That actually seems fairly compelling, I think, right? There's only one problem here, guys. What's the price? So there's two versions of this thing, right? So the standard version that has lower specs and less memory, slower processor, that kind of stuff, a smaller hard drive, right? That thing is still $599, guys. it's something to be mindful of. Let's just put it like that, right? But the higher end model, okay, is, you ready for this? Are you ready for this? $999. Yes, $1,000 for a handheld, portable PC device. The problem with that is, you might say, well, $999. Again, if you think about it in the context of typical handhelds, the PSP, even the Vita, obviously the DS, even the Switch, right? That is like ridiculously expensive, right? It's like over double the price of almost all of that stuff, right? But if you look at it as what it is, a kind of PC, this thing you literally can just dock it. Essentially, you can plug in a HDMI cable and, it can pump out to your big screen TV, and you're playing your PC library on your TV. So it actually kind of functions like a Switch device as well, right? If you look at it like that and look at, what it would cost for, standalone PC type stuff, it could be looked at as reasonable, right? Reasonable in that kind of, from that kind of lens, right? The problem is that Microsoft has been marketing this thing as an Xbox device, which it is not. It's a PC. It's a Windows 11 PC. It's not an Xbox because it literally cannot play Xbox games. It only can play PC games. So if you have a game, an Xbox game, you're only going to be able to play the PC version of that on Game Pass. Okay? If you have an Xbox game, a game that only came out on Xbox Series or Xbox One, is not going to run on this thing. So it is not an Xbox, despite what Microsoft is saying. And they're saying that because, they want you to look at it like, this is this console, but it can now do all this other stuff. It can, play all these other games on your PC, blah, blah, blah. Now, the overall vision here that Microsoft is trying to, get more closely aligned with the PC space, and this idea of this hybrid of bringing the console and the PC even closer together actually makes sense from their perspective, right? They're Microsoft. They effectively own the PC gaming space because they own Windows, right? And PC gaming is by and large Windows, right? So that kind of makes sense. And PC gaming is thriving, guys. Like, consoles is in a weird place, prices is crazy, and whatever. But PC gaming is thriving, right? So Microsoft trying to do that kind of makes sense. But guys, $1,000 for a handheld that it has Zen 2 CPU, Zen 2, which is the same generation processor from AMD that launched with the Xbox Series consoles in 2020. That CPU is literally about 5 years old now. It is an extreme version of it, meaning it's overclocked. It's only 8 core, 16 thread, which is the same configuration that you would find in the Xbox Series X console and PS5 as well, right? It has a Zen 2 CPU. It has an RDNA 3.5 GPU, which again is not cutting edge by any stretch of the imagination, but it has 16 CUs. 16 CUs. To put that number in perspective, the Xbox Series X has 54 RDNA 2 CUs. The PS5 has 36. Okay? So this thing has 16. And you realize that this thing is literally almost double the price of a PS5. And even with those crazy Xbox Series X price increases, it's still way more expensive than the Xbox Series X, right? As a handheld, right? Now, everything that I said earlier about what's going on with Microsoft, the price increases, the Game Pass increases, console increases, putting their games onto the competition to Sony, whatever, all of that is Microsoft being Microsoft being greedy because they need more money, right? They conceded the console war because PlayStation 5 has a much larger install base. It makes sense. If you want your games, your software to sell more, you gotta get it on PlayStation. That's why they did that. As hard as it was, I'm sure, for those Xbox fans, it was all about trying to get more money. They laid off so many people. They closed so many studios. Why? They have to trim the fat. Stop paying so many salaries. Trim the teams down. Cancel projects, games that are probably not going to sell well, games that probably are not coming together well. We got to kill it. Stop wasting money, investing money in these games for years and years, and it's not going to do well. Look what happened with Redfall. Look what happened with Forza Motorsport. Right? We can't afford any more of those. We need sure bets. We need more focus, right? That's why they're doing that. Right? Obviously, the Game Pass would have worked fine they were looking at Game Pass to be the vehicle to get them to that billion number range, right? The billion gamers out there in the world. Console hardware wasn't going to do it. They knew that. The Xbox wasn't going to do it. But Game Pass as a service that's on PC, on Xbox, and in their world would have been on PlayStation, would have been on iOS, iPads, and iPhones, and Android devices, right? Game Pass would have been everywhere. If that were the case, if they were able to deliver on that, maybe they would be looking at Game Pass subscription in the hundreds of millions at least, instead of the less than 100 million that they have now, right? Game Pass subscribers, the number isn't big enough for them to get the return that they need. So, okay, if it's we're not going to have those numbers, and Game Pass subscriptions have kind of plateaued over the last year or two, we need to get more money. We need to get our money's worth. So everybody that does get Game Pass, you need to be paying for it, right? And that's where that $30 a month is coming from now, right? So it's all in the service of that. That Xbox ROG Ally, that's another example of it, guys. This company is not playing around. They are not trying to take anything for a loss. You can argue all you want that $1,000 is somewhat reasonable in certain lenses, but there's no doubt about it that if this was Microsoft of old, that thing would have been probably topping out at $500, $600 maybe, right? But they're not doing it. They're not pricing things at that aggressively a console-like price anymore, right? They need the money. So what does all of this say about the future of Xbox and the next generation of Xbox, right? Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it actually, I think, says a lot. If you look at what's happening with the ROG Ally, what it is, first of all, and what it's doing with that Xbox experience and trying to, again, consolidate and unify and merge, essentially, the quote-unquote Xbox console experience with the PC, putting all of your games into one central place, right? All of the leaks and rumors, guys, which again I talked about, they're out there, and I'm gonna show some here. But all of the leaks and rumors for this future next generation Xbox, codenamed Magnus, it points to it being as you can see, a pretty powerful box, right? A sizable power, cutting edge, latest and greatest of AMD technologies that don't exist, today. That's still coming out in the next couple of years. RDNA 5s on the GPU side, Zen 6 on the CPU side, mind you. Again, this ROG Ally just came out, and it has Zen 2, right? So the next generation Xbox is looking at Zen 6, cutting edge stuff, right? 36 gigs of RAM probably is what the rumors are saying. It's going to be a beast for sure, and it's also going to be unlike any traditional console Microsoft has ever produced. It is not going to be a traditional console. It is basically going to be a PC that you can put into your that's designed to be put into a living room, connected to a TV. It's going to have this new Xbox experience UI. It's going to have the capability to run Steam and Epic Game Store and Battle.net and all of that kind of stuff from your PC and merge that library. But the difference between like the ROG Ally today and what this next Xbox will be is that it still will be an Xbox, right? Meaning it's going to be backwards compatible. It's going to be able to play native Xbox games from the Series generation, the Xbox One generation for sure, and obviously, the new generation, right? So it's going to do that, but also still be able to basically play your PC library, right? Seems pretty interesting. But guess what? All of that power, all of those features, all of that PC-like stuff is not going to equal a console price, right? And, all of the leaks and rumors all the rumblings right now are suggesting that this thing is going to be priced unlike any console we've seen before. It's going to be much more expensive than the upcoming PS6 because Sony is looking at actually a quite different approach with their next generation, trying to make a smaller, more power efficient, though it's not as big, it's not as power hungry, it doesn't take as much cooling like the PS5 did. They're trying to scale things down. And because they know what in today's economy, in today's world, like I said, we're a $750 PS5 Pro, right, an $800 Xbox Series X. They know that if they went all in, they could not, produce a console that would cost under $1,000, and that's just not reasonable for the typical console gamer. Microsoft is obviously not looking at this next box as a traditional console, and they're going to probably market it such. They're going to say this is a PC that brings a console-like experience. but for a cheaper price than what you would typically pay on the PC side, right? That's probably what their marketing is going to say here. And, we'll see. We'll see how it's going to be a very different look between everybody, right? Honestly. But in Microsoft's case, you tell me, guys, if the ROG Ally X with a Zen 2 and 16 CUs in it of RDNA 3.5, right? If that handheld device is costing $1,000 in 2025, and you heard what I said, you guys know, prices are not going down. Moore's law is dead. Okay? The transistor sizes are not going down. Compute power is not going up at nearly the rate that it used to be. We've kind of plateaued across all of the physical metrics of the chips, right? What I mean is, like, look at the clock speeds. The clock speeds are not increasing, right? The CU counts aren't really, breaking through the ceiling of whatever they had peaked at, right? We're not doing that. We're getting architectural improvements and stuff like that, efficiency improvements, but we're not just building bigger and bigger and more and more and more anymore. We can't do that, right? Microsoft can't do that. Sony can't do that. Nobody can do that, okay? NVIDIA is not doing that. AMD is not doing it, right? It's about efficiency. We're seeing that. Generation to generation, things are looking really similar, right? It's like barely a bump. Same general core range, core clock range, same number of shader units and CUs and, generally speaking, right? We're not seeing big jumps here anymore. Microsoft, if the ROG Ally is $1,000 in 2025, you guys tell me how this next generation Xbox, what it's looking like, is going to be anything less than $2,000. That sounds crazy, right? Could you imagine Microsoft coming out with an Xbox, quote unquote, branded device and trying to say it's $2,000, right? But you tell me, I'm saying the ROG Ally is probably not even going to be cheaper in 2 more years, right? 2027 is when this new Xbox is rumored to launch. It's probably not going to be much cheaper, right? And even if it is, might be down to $800 or something like that for that thing. The Series X is $800 for a 2 terabyte, right? So $650, right, for the 1 terabyte. The Series X, if we're lucky, might be back down to its original launch price at $500 if we're somehow lucky in the next 2 years. And the macroeconomics kind of adjust themselves. I doubt it, but I'm just saying. Best case scenario, Series X is the same price it was over 7 years, right? So in that kind of world, you tell me how you're going to build a box that is literally, you're looking at it on paper, easily roughly 10 times the power of this handheld ROG Ally. And that thing is $1,000. How do you do that for anything less than $1,000, right? I mean, even if they want to be aggressive with the pricing, that console aggressive pricing, there's no way it could be less than $1,000, right? I realistically think it's going to probably come in at $1,200 to $1,500, right? Which is probably going to be double the price of the PS6. The PS6 is still probably going to aim for $500 to $600, right? So maybe $700, but they're not going to hit. Sony is not going to be hitting $1,000. They're really not going to try to do that. So, guys, I mean, make it make sense. You guys make it make sense to me, please. This next Xbox is going to be, again, more of a PC, less of a console, for one, and it's going to be stupidly expensive. We thought the Neo Geo was expensive. If you guys are old enough to remember that, I am. You thought the 3DO was expensive, man. You thought the PS5 Pro was expensive. You thought the PS3 was expensive, the old infamous $599. Yeah, right. Xbox is going to come up with this new Xbox, and they're going to be like $1999.99, right? Seriously, right? They're clearly, again, this is new Microsoft. They're not trying to lose money on Xbox, right? They gotta price it reasonably for what it's worth, and you tell me how this box can be made and sold for less than $2,000. I'm all ears. So, I just wanted to point out, man, this new ROG Ally, I think, is a tantalizing glimpse into the future of Xbox, for better and for worse. That's all for now, guys. You hit me up in the comments. Let me know, please. I appreciate your support. Got more coming. True Techno Gamer, signing off.